Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. There's a moment, one clear, sharp moment, when a man realizes he's no longer a partner. He's an option. For me, it came on a Tuesday night. We were sitting in the living room, TV on, her scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. I reached out, nothing dramatic, just a hand on her knee, a silent gesture, something simple, familiar. She didn't look up, just said, "You'll get intimacy when I feel like it." No pause, no softness, like it was a privilege, like I should be grateful to be tolerated. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I froze, not out of fear, but clarity. That's when I realized this wasn't about love anymore. It was about leverage. She'd built this quiet, cold economy where affection was a currency, and I was bankrupt. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I didn't ask myself what I was doing wrong. I asked myself what I was still doing there. You see, it doesn't start with a betrayal. It starts with erosion. Bit by bit, you shrink. You stop asking for affection because you're tired of being denied. You stop speaking your mind because you're tired of the backlash. You stop existing as yourself and start existing as someone manageable. And that's what I had become. Manageable. Predictable. A man who could be ignored, knowing he'd still stay. And the worst part? She knew it. Because I let her. I let the eye rolls slide. I let the not tonight stack up like unpaid bills. I let her turn connection into negotiation. But that night, that one line, it flipped something in me. Not anger. Not sadness. Just decision. I didn't sleep. I got up before the sun, sat at the kitchen table, and drank black coffee in silence. She came in around 8 a.m., wearing my hoodie. Hair messy, voice soft, said, "You're up early." I looked at her, and I swear, for the first time in years, I didn't feel desire. I didn't feel warmth. I felt distance. And for the first time, I didn't try to close it. I just said, "Yeah, thought I'd get a head start." She smiled, walked past me, and never noticed the shift. But it had already started. Not the argument. Not the explosion. The departure. Because the strongest exits are the quietest. And mine had already begun. It was a Thursday when the mask slipped. She was in the kitchen, laughing into her phone. Not just smiling. Laughing, like something had touched her in a place I hadn't in months. Not physically, emotionally. That laugh wasn't mine anymore. I stood in the hallway, just out of sight. Listening. Observing. Learning. She said, "You're so bad," followed by a pause, and then, "He never notices anything." And just like that, the air in the house changed. She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. The insult wasn't the words. It was the ease. How casual it was to speak about me in the past tense while I was just 10 feet away. I didn't walk in. Didn't make a sound. I went back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt everything in me go still. Not shattered. Not betrayed. Strategic. Because what I felt in that moment wasn't rage. It was confirmation. All the nights, she claimed exhaustion. All the mornings filled with silence. All the passive distance that I once blamed on myself. It wasn't just detachment. It was deception. But I didn't confront her. That's what she would have expected. Drama, accusations, some emotional release she could control, redirect, manipulate. No, she wouldn't get that luxury. I smiled that day. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time in a long time, I saw the game for what it was. And I stopped playing it. She came to bed late that night, phone face down on the nightstand. She curled up beside me like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because while she was texting whoever made her laugh, I was drafting a different message. One she wouldn't receive until much later. The message of silence. Of absence. Of finality. I started making lists in my head. What I needed to move. What was in my name. What accounts she still had access to. What exits I could take without triggering alarm. Because this wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be surgical. Clean. The next morning, I watched her get ready. She hummed while doing her makeup. That same tune she used to sing when we first moved in together, back when she still looked at me like I mattered. I watched her, calm, detached. She turned to ask if we had plans for the weekend. I said, "Maybe. I'll let you know." She smiled like that answer made sense. Because she still thought I was in orbit. Still thought she was the sun. But the truth was, I was already light years away. Planning not revenge, but removal. And removal is always more powerful than retaliation. Especially when they don't see it coming. Some men react, when they find the truth. Others prepare. I didn't storm through her phone the night I heard her whisper laughing to someone else. I waited, observed, built my calm like armor. The next few days, she grew careless. Passwords stayed the same. Screens left unlocked. Notifications popped up when she was in the shower, or while cooking dinner, or when she dropped her phone and didn't notice it buzzed against the hardwood. It didn't take much. A few photos, some emojis, messages that started with "can't talk now" and ended with "he's home." Bank notifications showed charges I never saw before. 2 meals in one day at a place I never ate. Rideshare logs that didn't match her calendar. But the most telling part? It wasn't what I found. It was how easy it was to find it. Because she didn't care to hide it anymore. And that told me everything. She didn't think I'd leave. She thought I'd adapt. That I'd swallow the distance like I'd done before. That I'd accept intimacy as a privilege, not a partnership. She forgot one thing. Still water isn't peace. It's pressure. And I had been silent long enough. But my version of revenge wasn't chaos. It was clarity. So I began moving pieces. Changed passwords on shared accounts, subtly. Forwarded documents to a new email. Opened a second bank account. Quietly. Filed a change of address form for my work correspondence. Booked a storage unit and filled it one box at a time. Nothing she'd notice right away. Just small things. Spare jacket. Important files. My passport. The watch my father gave me. Each move calculated. Quiet. Intentional. I still said good morning. Still brought her coffee. Still let her believe she was in control. Because this wasn't about making her panic. It was about preparing my exit so precisely that when I was gone, it would feel like I had never been there at all. The detachment grew daily. She laughed less. Not because she sensed something was wrong, but because her audience was slipping. And she didn't know why. She still touched her phone like it was a lifeline. Still smiled at texts that made her feel wanted. But I watched her. Not with jealousy. Not with heartbreak. With focus. Because I wasn't in love with her anymore. I was in the final stages of extraction. And every time she ignored me, every time she rolled her eyes, every time she said, "You're overthinking," she was giving me more fuel. She thought she was winning. But the truth? The moment a man stops needing answers is the moment he becomes unstoppable. And I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was building an ending. One she'd never see coming. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of slow, quiet morning where she'd usually scroll Instagram for an hour before even speaking. I stood in the doorway, watching her, memorizing everything. Not because I missed her, but because I knew I'd never see her like this again. I told her I was going to the gym. She didn't even look up. Just said, "Don't forget milk," like I was some roommate she barely tolerated. So I nodded, picked up my bag, and left. Only I wasn't going to the gym. I never went back. I had packed the car the night before. Quietly, box by box. No slamming. No lights. The lease to a new apartment was already signed. Utilities set up. Wi-Fi installed. Locks changed. Location unshared. Every trace of me erased from her access. When I left the driveway, I turned off my phone. Not silent. Off. No signal. No messages. No trail. By the time she realized I wasn't coming back, I was already moved in, fridge stocked, keys in hand. It wasn't revenge. It was liberation. And I didn't owe her an announcement. The first voicemail came around 2 p.m. "Hey, where are you? I thought you were just grabbing milk." Then, an hour later, "Can you at least answer? This isn't funny." Then panic. "If you don't call me back, I'm calling the police. I'm serious." But she wouldn't. Because people like her only threaten control, they don't actually want consequences. And me disappearing? That was the one thing she never planned for. She had built an entire life around the idea that I would always be there. That no matter how distant, how cold, how manipulative she became, I would wait. But I was done waiting. I wasn't blocking her. I wasn't ghosting her to provoke a reaction. I simply removed myself from the equation. And the silence? It was louder than any argument I could have started. I stayed gone. Didn't check her socials. Didn't ask mutual friends. I knew what was happening without needing confirmation. She was unraveling. Not because she loved me, but because she didn't expect to lose her favorite mirror. The one that reflected back the image of a woman who could never be abandoned. No, she was staring into emptiness. I wasn't lost. I was done. And that's a kind of exit no one recovers from. Because I didn't leave a note. I didn't pack my memories. I left like a shadow fades at sunset. Unnoticed until it's already gone. By the time the dust started to rise on her side, I was already living a quiet, clean life 3 cities away. New apartment, new routines, a version of myself she never met. But I wasn't done. Because some truths deserve exposure not through chaos, but through precision. I knew his name. Saw it once in the corner of her phone when she was carelessly scrolling one night. Derek. That's all it took. One name. A quick reverse lookup. A social profile. Open comments. A tag from a mutual fitness coach account. Public posts. Turns out, Derek wasn't some random fling. He was married. With a kid. And his wife? Real estate agent. Professional page. Contact form. Personal blog with family photos still live. I didn't send a message. I didn't make a scene. I collected screenshots, timestamps, receipts, lunches with my credit card, trips with her girls that matched up with Derek's gym posts, GPS tags from the same location, same days. Again, I didn't react emotionally. I built a file. And when it was ready, I emailed it to a burner account. Not hers. His wife's. Subject line was simple. Not to hurt you. Just to free you. No signature. No explanation. Just the truth, delivered like a surgeon's cut. Clean. Unmistakable. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. But I heard it, eventually. A mutual friend messaged me weeks later. Said my ex looked off. Said she was asking around. Wanted to know if I was okay. If I'd been involved in something. I said nothing. Because you don't explain silence to people who weaponized your voice. From what I gathered, Derek's life collapsed faster than hers. His wife moved out. Posted one final photo with a caption that read, "You don't lose a good man by accident. You lose him by choice. And I choose peace." No tags. No names. But I saw it. And I knew. My move wasn't revenge. It was exposure. He was a crack in her secret life, and I simply widened it until the entire structure fell under its own weight. She didn't post anything for weeks. When she came back online, her captions were cryptic. Vague references to growth, healing, and letting go of what no longer serves you. But what really stood out? She never mentioned love again. Not once. Because it was no longer something she could trade or control. It had turned into a mirror she couldn't look into without flinching. And me? I wasn't even in the reflection anymore. I had become the echo she couldn't reach. The man who didn't scream. The man who didn't threaten. The man who simply vanished and left her whole illusion in ruins. Silence doesn't always come in private. Sometimes it shows up in public, when people who used to orbit you start stepping back. She thought she could contain the collapse. She changed her tone online, shifted her energy, posted vague affirmations and spiritual quotes about lessons from pain. But the people around her weren't blind. Her friends, at least the ones we both knew, started pulling away. No fights, no blocking, just distance. A few of them reached out to me quietly. One sent a simple message. "I always wondered how you stayed so patient." Another said, "I didn't want to say anything before, but the way she talked about you, it wasn't right." I didn't reply. I didn't need validation. But I understood one thing. She hadn't just lost me. She lost the illusion of being the one who was always right. Because betrayal doesn't just destroy love, it shifts perception. And now, people were starting to see her for what she really was. It came to a head at a friend's baby shower. One of the few mutuals still keeping polite ties. She showed up dressed like she was still performing. Loud laugh. Too much perfume. Late on purpose. But the room didn't bend toward her the way it used to. People smiled, nodded, but no one leaned in. No one asked how she was. Then someone said it, softly, but in earshot. "You really thought no one would notice?" She froze, turned slowly, but no one met her eyes. The room moved on without her. That's what silence really looks like. Not absence of sound, but absence of attention. She didn't storm out. She stayed, which made it worse. Because now she wasn't the center. She was the ghost. Later, someone sent me a photo from that day. Group shot. She was off to the side, barely in frame, staring into the middle distance like she knew she didn't belong. That was the moment the social tide turned. Not through confrontation, but isolation. And isolation, for people like her, is the real punishment. Not because they miss love, but because they miss being watched, controlled, adored. She had no one to blame. Because she never lied with fury. She lied with convenience. And now? No one was buying what she was selling. She tried to pivot. New hobbies. New captions. Tried rebranding herself into someone healed. But healing doesn't come from pretending. It comes from reckoning. And she had no interest in that. Because reckoning means facing silence. And silence was now her only audience. There's a difference between being alone and being left alone. She used to weaponize solitude, turned it into drama. The silent treatment, the closed-door rituals, the deliberate refusal to speak unless spoken to. It was never quiet, it was control. But now it was just quiet. Because nobody was listening. Her closest friends, the ones she counted on to rally behind her, to offer outrage on demand, were gone. Not blocked, not fought with. Just uninterested. She reached out, of course. DMs, voice notes, fake concern wrapped in apology. I've been going through a lot. I didn't know who I could trust. But trust isn't something you demand when you're sinking. It's what you build before the storm. And she never built it. She exploited it. So they didn't answer. Or worse, left her on read. She tried to spin it publicly. Posted stories of iced coffees, walks in the park, sunsets with filters. But silence leaves a trail. And people could feel it. She started talking to herself online. Long captions with no engagement. Emotional outbursts disguised as poetry. I forgive you notes with no subject. Even her ex-lovers, those background shadows she kept for attention, disappeared. Because nobody wants to be the rebound of someone who lost everything. And I watched it all from a distance. Not with joy. Not with vengeance. With clarity. Because the truth is, I was never her enemy. I was her mirror. And when I removed that mirror, she could no longer see herself as the untouchable one. That kind of isolation? It doesn't scream. It dissolves. She texted me once. Just once. No anger. No questions. Just a line. Do you ever think about how things ended? I read it while sipping black coffee on a balcony she'd never sit on. I didn't reply. Because when a man steps out of the game, the final play isn't noise. It's distance. She had turned every moment we had into a performance. Now the stage was empty. The applause gone. And the audience? Already watching someone else. That's what isolation really means. Not that no one is around you, but that no one is with you. And in that silence, she finally met herself. Not the version filtered for approval, but the one who lost everything by thinking nothing could ever be lost. And me? I was still here, but not as her shadow. As the silence she created and could never quiet again. It took her 3 months to ask for a meeting. 3 months of silence, of watching herself spiral without an audience, of pretending it didn't affect her. But eventually, the silence grew too loud to ignore. She messaged me one morning. Can we talk? I read it. Let it sit. Answered 2 days later with one word. Sure. We met in a cafe. Neutral ground. Public. Daylight. She showed up early. I arrived exactly on time. She stood when she saw me, like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or apologize. I didn't offer either. Just sat. Nodded once. She started with small talk, like we were strangers reconnecting. Weather, work, how strange it felt to see me. I didn't interrupt. I didn't fill the silence between her words. I let her talk herself into circles. She finally broke the rhythm. I need to understand what happened. I looked at her. Not with anger. With distance. And that hit her harder than anything else. Because she wasn't ready to face a version of me that didn't flinch. That didn't need her validation. That didn't ache for answers. I gave her 2 words. You know. She blinked. Tried to recover. It wasn't what it looked like. But I wasn't listening to the words. I was listening to the tone. The desperation behind her need to rewrite history. She needed this moment. Needed to feel like she still mattered in my world. But she didn't. Not anymore. I let the silence return. Watched her shift in her seat. Bite her lip. Look around like someone would rescue her from the conversation. No one did. Because this wasn't her stage anymore. This was a closed chapter she forgot she wasn't writing. She leaned and finally dropped her voice. I miss how you used to look at me. I sipped my coffee, then placed it down, and said what she feared most. That man doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't cruel. It was final. She sat back like I had slapped her. But I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply told her the truth. The version of me that once waited for her to come home, that once asked why, that once hoped for change, that man was gone. And what remained? Wasn't angry. Just done. She reached for my hand. I didn't move. She asked if we could talk again. I shook my head. Not out of hate. Out of peace. Because I didn't need closure. She did. But not from me. From herself. And as I stood to leave, she didn't follow. She just sat there, in the same chair, in the same outfit she had picked to impress me, watching the door close without a sound. There's a kind of unraveling that doesn't scream. It whispers. It starts with missed payments, quiet late fees, subscription declines. That frozen look when a card gets declined at checkout and she has to pretend it's the bank's mistake. The man she counted on to orbit her world? Gone. And with me went the quiet infrastructure she never noticed. I was the one who tracked bills, canceled overdraft fees, moved money between accounts, smoothed over chaos before it became visible. Now that chaos had a front row seat. I heard it through fragments. A former coworker mentioned she was behind on rent, that her usual polished look was starting to fray at the edges. Another friend said she showed up late to a gathering, looked thinner, quieter, not in a graceful way, more like someone being slowly erased. But no one offered to help, not because they hated her, because they remembered how she had played queen when it suited her, vanished when someone else needed support, and twisted concern into leverage. No one was reaching back. Even her social media, once a highlight reel of filtered perfection, began to fade. No more couple shots. No more brunches. Just reposted quotes from accounts with usernames like healing_soul_444 and trusty Orpath. And I stayed quiet. Because this wasn't revenge. It was consequence. She texted once more. This time, no pretense. I'm not okay. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of principle. Because being okay had always been her performance. And now that the show was canceled, she didn't know who she was backstage. The collapse wasn't a moment. It was a slow erosion. Her reputation slipped. She lost a freelance client after ghosting one too many deadlines. One of her friends posted a vague tweet. Some people drain you and call it love. It got likes. She didn't respond. And I was thriving. Health back. Bank account stable. Weekends full. My space calm. Not louder. Quieter. Because I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't posting my piece. I was living it. And while she fell deeper into a silence she couldn't weaponize, I became everything she once tried to overshadow. Whole. Still. And utterly unreachable. She thought losing me meant losing a boyfriend. What she lost was her last shield against the truth. That without control, she wasn't powerful. She was just seen. And in that kind of spotlight, there's nowhere to hide. It happened 6 months later. Not planned. Not staged. Just one of those intersections life hands you to see how far you've come. I was walking out of a bookstore. It was quiet. Early evening. The sky dimming but still gold. I held a bag with 2 new titles, ones I'd never have bought while I was with her. Back then, I read what she read. Watched what she liked. Smiled when she spoke over me. That man? Gone. I turned the corner, and there she was. Same street. Same city. But not the same presence. She looked smaller. Not physically. Spiritually. Like someone trying to wear the costume of her former self. The makeup was there, but the eyes weren't. The voice was cautious now. Measured. Afraid to be heard too loudly. She stopped when she saw me. Frozen, like a glitch in a system. I didn't change pace. Didn't pause. Just kept walking with the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove he'd survived. She stepped into my path. No smile. Just questions burning behind her silence. I gave her 1 second. And in that second, I saw it all in her face. Regret. Recognition. And most of all, realization. She opened her mouth. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to beg. Maybe to scream. Didn't matter. Because I was already past it. I didn't stop. Didn't ask how she was. Didn't remind her of what she'd lost. Because she already knew. People like her don't need reminders. They live with echoes. And I don't speak in echoes anymore. I speak in presence. In absence. In stillness that no longer waits for permission. As I walked past, she turned slowly. I didn't. Not out of spite. Out of power. Out of peace. And when I finally spoke, it wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was final. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She didn't follow. She couldn't. Because some doors aren't slammed. They're sealed. And some endings aren't explosions. They're completions. That was the last time I saw her. And I hope she remembers it forever. Not because I left her, but because I never had to say goodbye. She did that for both of us the day she thought I'd stay no matter what. I left in silence. And silence was the only thing she couldn't control. That's the cost of playing games with someone who already learned how to win quietly. Not through revenge. Not through rage. but through removal. Clean, cold, and irreversible. Been through it? When they crossed a line and you made sure they felt it.